I picked a story because it was your question on Friday that made me pick this story. We'll get into that. Okay. So how's Monday? Did you get a lot of bingo tickets sold?
Yeah, I didn't do bad there, but I got a bit of a surprise actually. As you know, yesterday morning I was coughing quite a bit, and you joked that I had COVID. Well, I had COVID.
Oh no.
Yeah, and the worst part of it, and I only tested myself as an abundance of caution because I plan to go see my mom. She's 92, and I'm coughing a lot, so I'm not going to go in there while I'm coughing. But I thought, well, I better find, I thought, well, I've got all these test kits and never used them.
You're better off double checking,
Yeah. So I checked it, and to my surprise, I got COVID. Oh. And then I told my buddy across the street who came to me with, who was with me at a lacrosse game on Saturday. I says, you know what? That cough I had is COVID. And so he tested himself yesterday, and it was negative. But then tested himself this morning. He's just messaged me. Had a pretty rough night, and he's now positive. Great. So I gave it to him.
Oh, ouch. Does that mean that you caught it while away or something else?
I don't know. I have a feeling I caught it at a funeral home on Wednesday night, and but it could have been, it could have been from. What mixed it up is I was traveling with my son and his girlfriend, and then my other son and his girlfriend, and my youngest son's girlfriend got a cold.
Yeah,
a real cold, right? So that's what I thought I had.
Maybe you have a cold, and maybe you have COVID as well.
Not likely, I think, but because they're so similar anyway, you know what I mean? They present very similarly, especially the mild strain that I have,
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, so you're kind of self-isolating for a little while.
Yeah, I'm not going to go anywhere too soon. I was supposed to go do the agenda with Paul today, but I won't be doing that. I don't want to expose anybody to this. It's not a killer strain, but it really is aggravating.
Not now. No, we've kind of, you could come in contact with, probably come in contact with others, and many wouldn't even catch it from you, right?
Probably. There's a lot of well, look, I've been around it many times, around people who have had it or who have it, and it never caught up to me.
Yeah.
I've been into, but I got face to face with it somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
And
you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Well, I'm not worried. I'm not worried.
Yeah.
It's not like my middle boy got it, and he was out of commission for 2.5 weeks. He's a young, strong man, and he was laid up for 8 days, and couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah. But that was during the height of the crisis, wasn't it?
Well, it was right in the middle of it. And my other two boys got it too, but they have it more like I have it, kind of a irritation, discomfort kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So here's a question for you. Is Justin Trudeau fighting back? He aims criticism of foreign workers working at the EV plants and accuses Poilievre of distracting Canadians from the Conservative record.
I'm not so sure. This stuff gets pretty silly. You
can tell an election's coming, though, can't you? Absolutely, you can tell an election's coming.
Oh, yeah. Now, what Poilievre is doing here is he has to be very careful how he aligns himself on this. Of course, this is a great. Now, Trudeau is accusing him of sort of being against the developments, the EV developments and all that. And that's never said by Poilievre. He'd be mad to say that because it's going to bring a lot of jobs into Ontario. And it is. What Poilievre has done is said that, number one, it's cost too much. There's too much subsidies. Well, he probably would have done the same thing really in Trudeau's place to get those jobs, to get those plants built here. But the other thing is he's complaining about, and justly so, that there are too many of the construction jobs going to go to foreign workers. Yeah. This is something that the federal government just never gets right. Never gets it right. It makes these deals with a foreign country to come in and do investment, and then they write in the small print, we'll be bringing our own workers to do the job. Yeah. Well, of course, they'd like to bring their own workers into the job because that makes them more money back home with their own guys, Yeah. And that's an issue because
the other thing is you got a worker from Korea, even if he's a fairly well-paid worker from, let's say, South Korea, and he's coming here to build a thing, right? He's probably less expensive than the average worker in Canada.
I'm not so sure that's a thing nowadays because of the standard of living in South Korea.
Probably not as much as it would be, for sure, yeah.
But the real point is that at one point they were going to turn 1,600 construction jobs over to the Koreans or whoever else was building it. So that is a main sticking. But of course, what Trudeau says, he's against these investments. He's against these.
He's not. He's just against the foreign workers, and that the foreign influx of workers, and that's the important thing. Because he's saying we've got enough unemployment and we need to deal with that first.
That's part of it. The other part, of course, is he's doing his due diligence by complaining about how much the feds have put taxpayer money into this.
And let's be honest. Every opposition leader has got to complain about has got to complain about government spending anyway, because that's about it's easy to complain about another person spending on things that you don't see as priority, but it's quite different when you're in power.
Now, the problem I see here is that the narratives are Trudeau is doing the extreme narrative that Poilievre is dissing these investments and they're dissing the jobs that will be created and all that. It's very unlikely Poilievre would do that at all. I mean, it would be stupid. But on the other hand, Poilievre hasn't come out and endorsed them either. Of course, he's probably very happy that they're there, but by endorsing them, he would sort of support the Trudeau position. So in reality, what we have here is both parties trying to make as big of a mountain out of a molehill as they can.
Yeah.
Poilievre hasn't stood up and said, "Oh, I love that," although secretly he probably does because he knows this is going to mean a lot of jobs and investment in Canada.
Yeah.
And so he can't say that because obviously because it was a Trudeau initiative along with a cooperation with a conservative provincial government. One of those few times where idealism gets shoved to the side and practical cooperation is required and happened. So my hat's off to both Trudeau and Ford for getting this done.
Well, the other
aside from that, but Poilievre's position, of course, he can't sing the praises of it. So he's got to find out what's wrong with it. And of course, what's wrong with it to him is the so-called massive amounts of taxpayer money to subsidize it, and the workers that will be coming offshore. And of course, there's a battle for the vote of the worker, the union worker these days. In a bizarre set of circumstances, both in the United States and in Canada, the union worker is often looking to their natural born enemy, which were the Conservatives, and losing faith in NDP and Liberals.
Yeah. Okay. Next Star made a statement about this, and they said out of the 1,975 workers currently on the project, only 72 are not Canadian, right? And none of those original 72 will be counted as part of the 2,500 jobs that will be created for Canadians once the construction phase is complete.
Well, at one point there, they announced the building of one of the plants was going to take 1,600 workers from Korea, or was it Japan? I can't remember.
Yeah.
So that one hasn't even been built yet. So that was one. Like, so at the current levels, yeah, that's happening. But the fact of the matter is, they did threaten to get 1,600 workers for one of the plants that is yet to be built.
But you know, yeah, I know. But you see, probably there's a lot of kind of foreign workers who would put up these sort of plants in Japan or Korea or whatever, that probably will go, I want to, they want me to go for a year to Canada. I don't think so.
Well, these are construction guys. I mean, you go where the work is. Construction people do that. They
probably have
whether it's in another country or another county.
Well, yeah, but they probably have as many construction projects back home as they do here.
It doesn't matter if they say, look, we got a chance to make some loot in Canada, let's go.
Anyway, some will, some won't. Some will.
Well, the guy was a construction worker. I know what I'm talking about here.
No, I'm not denying that.
A lot of construction workers are itinerant. I mean, when I worked in Libya, my first gig there was construction, and when that was over, then I moved into the maintenance aspect. I've gone from place to place to place all over Ontario doing construction.
Oh, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that there's always a mix of people. Some that are gung ho to go to any new place, and some that want to stay at home. Anyway, you know. We'll see. These are get built, and the thing is, of course, what we've got here is an argument over how many foreign workers should be involved in these projects, in the building projects.
Here it is. Here, they say that around 1,600 South Korean workers to arrive to work on the town's new electric vehicle battery plant, which is heralded by the federal government, and that was back in November 2023 that they announced it. And Windsor police say they expect 1,600 Koreans to work at the EV battery plant. That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about the few that's in this article. And for some reason, this article didn't mention the 1,600, which makes me wonder who wrote the article.
Weird, eh? Yeah. Well, this is written by the Star.
There you go.
Toronto Star article. Therefore, broadly, and I only say broadly because you can't say any more than that. Broadly pro-liberal, but that is, it is what it is, right?
Well, this is sometimes it's called the Red Star.
Yeah, we know that, but it doesn't have a red banner. It's very much a blue banner, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's just a sort of word, a turn of phrase. But they and I've read the Star a lot in the past when I was in a political action committee. They have a wonderful way of leaving facts out. What they don't particularly like, whatever their agenda is. When they talked about, I remember that how many facts they exaggerated or left out when it came to coal burning plants or fossil fuels. When they talked about expense of they would talk a lot about coal burning coal plants and how bad they are. talk about windmills and exaggerate how much power they're going to make. And then they would talk about the price of power, and they would leave coal out because it was the second cheapest. So they would say, oh, this is hydro, this is nuclear, this is wind and solar. But they, at the time, coal and oil were still being used, but they never mentioned them because they were, after hydro, they were cheaper, much cheaper than the nuclear or the wind and solar. Well, especially the wind and solar. So they have this way of giving you what they want you to feed.
Well, again,
and so that's got to be the reason why they left that out, because they don't want Trudeau to look too bad. They're more of a liberal paper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that unfortunately is the way the press go. You know, whether they support one political party or the other, wherever they are in the world, we tend to be getting more journalism by political persuasion than ever before.
Well, it's unfortunate for us that we have rediscovered that you feed the people the information that you want to feed them and what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So I say, like, say in the year 2000, if I said, well, it makes economical sense to keep the coal plants going because they provide a lot cheaper power than wind and solar or whatever. Well, it wouldn't get published in the Star. You know, it would in the Sun, but not the Star. You know, and it's not something you want to hear. You know, and just like nukes, like we talk about nukes, about they're the only thing that's going to be able to replace or expand our power base would be nukes. The only thing that can burn that does not add carbon to the atmosphere, but nobody wants nukes. So it's like, well, what are your alternatives? And but they won't say. They just say, oh, we don't want nukes, you know.
Yeah.
So that anyway, that aside, this little bickering that's going on between Poilievre and Trudeau, I think Trudeau's pretty well got the best of this one, though. He has cooperated well with the province. You don't find Ford dissing the federal Liberals at all. He's made a deal with them. He's made a couple good deals with them. He's brought investment into Ontario.
And the key factor, he's brought investment into Ontario, and that's what is actually buoying up his popularity on these particular deals.
Yeah, so you can argue that Ford's very unpopular in Ontario. I don't think that's true, though. There's a lot of vocal, yeah, because obviously he got voted in incredible fashion.
Well, I've had people who don't particularly like Ford saying one thing about Ford is that he's practical.
Well, that's what the old-fashioned conservatives used to offer the voter, like a practical, no real ideological bent, basically just stimulate business, motivate, get
the job done. And get the job done. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Okay. So moving on, there was last weekend there was this ride program that happened in Port Colborne and St. Catharines, and there's been drivers have received license suspensions and tickets after these spot checks that occurred. And well, basically they do this from time to time. They go out, they just basically stop drivers, and essentially what they're doing to a large extent is checking the breath. They stop drivers on the entrance to the on the entrance to the highway, and and they ask questions, and as they do so, they're checking their breath. Does it smell?
Yeah, or sniffing around for marijuana cigarettes. Yeah, they're not too subtle about that. I've been stopped, and they say, "Oh, you roll down your window, so roll down your window all the way, sir." I roll. Then they stick their head right in your hello, like their face is about this far from you, right? Whoa, they're like this, and and then they ask you a bunch of questions, and away you go.
Yeah,
but yeah. So if you've been drinking, it's pretty hard to hide the smell of that.
Yeah.
Even if you do all kinds of gum or anything else. Like I was a designated driver a couple of times.
3 cups of coffee after 15 beers isn't going to cut it, is it?
No, I've been a designated driver a couple of times, and the car just reeks with alcohol. If you've got even one person in there that's been drinking all night, you get them in the car, and you go in. Once they sit down, you go in, and you could smell it all over them.
Oh,
and
yeah,
if a cop pulls you over, you got no hope.
Well, you might not be drunk, but hey, other people in the car, essentially that's and that's about what they're saying here. They pulled over quite a few cars, but basically only, they stopped 400 drivers and asked if any of them had consumed alcohol or drugs, right? But they only 8 drivers were required to provide breath samples, right? So they pulled a load over, but they didn't. A load may well have been like you, designated drivers who were perfectly sober, who were in a car full of alcohol.
Sodden sods.
Yeah, sodden sod. Yeah, that's the right way to describe it, right? And again,
this is going to happen more and more. I figure.
The sniff test isn't going to. The sniff test will detect that you have taken a drink, even if you're not over the blood alcohol level of 0.50, right?
Yes. I don't know really quite what to say, other than don't drink and drive, don't smoke and drive.
Yep, exactly. No, that's an
example. And here's something that over-the-counter meds, you got to worry about them sometimes. Painkillers and other things you may have had from your doctor. You got to read the instruction on it. Sometimes these things make you drowsy. So that too. And okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I had one of these one time. I had the thing from the doctor, and oh my God, it was instant destruction. I took a swig, I took a spoonful of it, as directed, and I'm out cold. I hate that loss of control,
Yeah, that's no good when you're driving. You don't want to go out cold when you're driving.
Obviously, I was sitting in my, on my sofa. I just didn't like that at all.
Well, this is another thing that we should be aware of. Really, is tiredness. When we had the OPP come and talk to us a couple of times when I was at OPG, and they have information sessions for a large number of workers in the area and so on. So they would come and talk to us, and our employer would let us all collect into rooms where the OPP would talk to us, and they were talking about 0.5 alcohol and all that, and they can usually tell if you've been drinking, if you're driving and drinking. But what they have found out is especially around there where there was a lot of steel mills, there was a power mill and a refinery. So there's lots of guys going in and out of shift all the time. What they found was they were pulling somebody over they thought was impaired, but when they pull him over, they find out that he's just dead tired. Yeah, and that he might be nodding off or just plain tired. Or if they find a guy pulled over the side of the road, they think he might be drunk, but he's just tired.
Yeah, tiredness is a big killer. Absolutely, it is. Right?
Yeah, they say it's more of an issue where at that particular area than alcohol or drugs were.
Well, and especially you hear about people working 2 or 3 consecutive shifts and then driving home, and they're all over the place. In fact, there was one I seem to remember from the past where this guy just impaled himself into a highway, into a highway central reservation or something, and caused a major traffic backup. I don't remember that it was here, but he basically caused a major traffic backup, and it had been found that he'd been he just going home after about 3 shifts. Massively tired,
Well,
killed.
So I could tell you that the guys I worked with, among the guys I worked with, I know a couple of guys that fell asleep and drove right off the road, hit trees. Luckily, they weren't hurt. Another guy fell asleep and drove right into the feeder canal, and down around Dunville way. So they and this happened a fair amount of times. The guys would fall asleep, and guys were carpooling. Were waking themselves up, waking the other guy up. So one guy would, you're usually the passenger gets the chance to sleep, but what was happening more often than not, depending on who was driving, they were staying awake to make sure that guy stayed awake because he had a reputation of falling asleep. Yeah. I was myself in a carpool a couple different times where the guys fell asleep, and that's because we're running really long hours, and you're in a long drive into work and they nod off, so you got to wake them up.
And as you get older, of course, your likelihood of falling asleep at the wheel is increased.
Well, yeah, it could be. It depends on how far you push it. If you're doing all night driving, that's not a good fit with an older person.
This is, of course, one of the reasons why bus drivers and truck drivers, have to have records of their driving records, right? They have to keep to the minute records of when they were driving, when they stopped driving, when they were resting.
Yes, well. Yeah, but for a while there, they carried double sets of books, and until they were able to get rid of that, there was the truck drivers were down in pennies like crazy because during the 70s there was lots of work for the truck drivers, and I knew a couple of them, and they just beamed their way across the nation and back again, so they would just do bennies all the time, and they would have 2 sets of books. One to show the inspectors and one for the real one, the one they got paid off of. They've been able to get that back now. They don't do that anymore. But yeah, so a lot of the truck drivers were doing that, just taking beans all the way there and back again, and that was getting dangerous. Yeah. So. But nowadays they got governors on the engines. They can do all kinds of different things to check these guys, and you don't get the guys doing the beans on the way there and on the way back because they're being checked. They have medical levels they have to be pass, etc. So that doesn't happen so much anymore.
Yeah, and thank goodness, because you see one of those 53-foot trucks. As a result of a tiredness, you can see them even with tiredness waving across out of their lane, and that becomes quite dangerous, right?
Yeah, I saw one truck coming over while I was following it. It was coming over the Skyway, heading this way, really.
Yeah.
Not the Skyway, the Burlington Skyway, right? Well, and the guy was all over the road. Like I just got past him before he he was doing one of these, and I got past him, and then he just went way back and way for, and then I think he just kind of got lucky and woke up when there was an exit there, because then he went off the exit. But I think he just kind of woke up.
No, that has actually been worst of that is actually when it happens in front of you, and when you're just about to overtake the truck and, hey, the guy starts waving all over the place, encroaching on your lane, and probably the best thing to do is what most people don't, which is honk, right? Real loud honk will wake the guy up, and, and at least you can then pass.
Yes.
But anyway, so yeah, so they're doing the breath tests, etc. There, they might do some more. They may do some more. I know 3 guys smashed their cars coming off midnights. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Precisely the thing.
And
Okay.
look, I knew a guy that died of a heart attack. I was working with him, right, and on the same crew. He jumped. He had a Volvo, and we worked out of the Hamilton Hall. He jumped in. He was a great guy. He was a laugh. He was a laugh to work with. And I see him take off, and so all we did too. But a little later on, we found out that he had a heart attack and swerved out of control. Luckily, he didn't hit anybody, but he died in his car. He died of a heart attack, and he could have taken a few people with him. But as it turned out, it didn't, thankfully. But he died,
Yeah. Yeah.
But there you go. You never know when somebody's going to have a heart attack coming bearing down on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Now, protesters at a pro-Palestinian encampment at McGill University say they're not going anywhere.
Doesn't this all sound like the 60s? The anti-war stuff in the 60s?
Yeah.
Doesn't it? It really smacks of that to me. So you have these university protesters all over North America. Well, I guess they're happening some in Europe as well. University protesters all over North America that the establishment hates, but the young are backing. Now they've tried to paint a lot of these as anti-Semitic rallies and stuff like that. They are, for the most part, not that at all. Mainly because they are quite often involve Jewish students as well, who are not too happy with what the Israeli government is doing. Now they may or may not be Israeli citizens as well, but they are Jewish, and they're dead against what's happening in Gaza.
Well, they're basically saying there's a wave of pro-Palestinian demonstrations being held on campuses across the United States, who want to see universities divest companies with business ties to Israel.
Yeah, that's one of the angles they're using. They're trying to the university itself, of course, has I didn't know this, but I suppose that universities have investments like everybody else. They have a certain amount of money coming in, and then they use that money to invest. And McGill is a very famous university, so it will not be one of those universities that suffer lack of enrollment because it is a high-end university. So
one of the things that you're talking about investments, yes, all universities take investments because firms want research on this or that or the other subject, right?
Yeah, they do investments just from what I read here, is they just do investments just for the sake of doing investments, like anyone else would do an investment, like your pension plan. Like they probably have pension plans and medical plans, and what they use with that is they use accumulated funds to and the investments. They reap the rewards of the investment, and that's partly what pays for the pensions and other things. And they may just have investments, all in all, just to make money, for the same reason why everybody else does. It's because they're an institution, they can do that. So basically, what one of the big deals all over North America is to zero in on those companies who are good. Oh, here's from Robert Dopel. Is that it?
Yeah.
Good morning, gentlemen. Can you say Kent State University? Yeah. Fort Dead in Ohio. Yeah. What about that? That's for sure. That's what it reminds me a little bit. I was afraid it was going to get to Fort Dead in Ohio, basically, because well, of course, Netanyahu has told them to get the National Guard out there and wipe them all out. They're of course, Netanyahu, anything anti-Israel is anti-Semitic, so it doesn't that doesn't matter,
Well, the point about this is that I cannot be supportive of Israel, which doesn't mean I'm anti-Jewish, and I cannot be supportive of Hamas, but I'm very deeply concerned about the state of the Palestinian people out there.
Yeah, of course, but radicalization comes with oppression. You oppress a people, they become radicalized.
Yes.
They react, then you react back. And just as they then you become murderers and the murdered, and it just keeps going on and on. The truth of what's happening in Israel right now, they want the West Bank and they want Gaza. They want the Palestinians out of there. And there's equal number of Palestinians and Israelis in the area, which is Israel and Palestine now, which includes Gaza. If the only way that the Israelis are going to be able to incorporate that landmass is to push them out. What they've done now is try to make life as miserable as possible for them, so in hopes that they would go somewhere else. As soon as and Gaza's Netanyahu, well, the Israelis apparently have offered the Egyptians a lot of money to take the Gazans and get them out of there so they could take the Gaza Strip. The Egyptians won't fall for it, though. The only other thing is, like, they might put them in a corner of the Negev desert, but there's a couple of things there. Israel will never feel safe with the West Bank in Arab or Palestinian hands. So the only thing they can do is get rid of them.
Mike actually says a very important point here. Anti-Semitic bullshit. If you disagree with Jewish decision, doesn't make you anti-Semitic. This is an overused word, and if you disagree with Israel, doesn't make you anti-Semitic.
Well, I think the decisions is Israeli decisions, not so much Jewish decisions, because Jewish opinion among Jewish people is very split all over the place. So one Jewish institution may have sympathy towards the Palestinians, another one may not. Another one may be a Zionist. So, the real problem here is Zionism, not Judaism.
Yeah. Moving on, by the way, Israel PM Netanyahu has asked Biden to help prevent the International Criminal Court from issuing arrest warrants for key Israeli people in the war in Gaza.
Well, I don't know if I don't know if Biden can help Bibi out in this particular case.
Well, I was going to say the way not to get arrested by the International Criminal Court is not to commit the crime.
Well, the United States has a lot of power, even in the International Court crime, but they have been giving Israel a green light in everything they wanted to do. They say talk about BS. They say, "Oh, we don't want you to do. We want you to open your borders to let more food in." So they don't do it, and they say, "Well, you should open the borders, let some more food in." We're not going to do that. Okay, then we'll drop some from the air, and then we'll build our own little harbor and bring it in. What does that tell you? Bibi's in the driver's seat. They are so afraid of AIPAC and the Israeli lobby in the United States, and there's an election coming up, and Joe is not too happy. He has to pay second fiddle to Bibi Netanyahu. It's bizarre when a hugely unpopular prime minister of Israel is slapping around a president of the United States, telling him what to do. I mean, it's just totally bizarre. But now Bibi wants Biden to help him out and see if he could use his influence so that he is not charged in the International Court of Justice. I think I'm not so sure that can be stopped. They tried to stop the South African initiative for genocide. I think the South African, when they finally get it all wrapped up, it'll take years. They will find very strong elements of genocide in what Israel did to Gaza.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much more Israel can rely on the United States to do their bidding. I mean, I think the average electorate is getting pretty sick of it. Right now, they are in a very, very powerful situation because they own more. They own more than half of the Congress. I think what I saw it, but it's more than half of Congress are in the pockets of AIPAC in one way or another, influenced by them in one way or another. Nobody wants to defy AIPAC because of the power they have, including Joe Biden. And Joe Biden himself has taken huge amounts of money from AIPAC. He's been a resounding. He's applauded AIPAC because they give him money, and now he's in a situation where AIPAC's going to be his enemy if he doesn't watch it. So that's why Netanyahu gets to do exactly what he wants to do.
And actually, in that regard, there's also a storm brewing in Michigan where Arabs in the state are prepared to kind of hand the presidency back to Donald Trump.
Isn't this bizarre? Look, in the United States right now, you have two very terrible leaders. Trump is a terrible leader, and Biden is a terrible leader. They really don't have much going for them. Trump is an egomaniac. Anybody that's ever worked with him says, he's dangerous because he's ignorant. What he does. Biden is just blowing it one way after another. He's looking like he's a warmonger, and this is who they have. They have 330 million people in the United States, and these are the two guys you have to vote, right? Maybe RFK will draw a few votes, but this is who they've got to vote for. Now, what would normally be a knee-jerk reaction of the Arabs in Michigan would have voted for the Democrats, but they're not going to now. They aren't. They aren't going to vote for who they call Genocide Joe now.
Yeah.
Right. They would rather have Trump.
And that's kind of irony.
Do you know what that means? That is super remarkable that the Arabs of the United States, who've been there for many years, goes back to, I don't know, the 30s or something, have finally fed up with the Democrats and would vote Republican instead, because their natural born enemy, the Republicans, are better off than their supposed ally, the Democrats.
Yeah. Some of that is really kind of odd, isn't it? Well, in fact, actually, I would say the whole thing about since Trump stood, we can say in the 3 elections that Trump has stood in, normality has been stood on its head.
Yeah. And the reaction to him has been kind of weird too.
Yes.
Now, Biden was able to squeeze out a victory because there was more people that didn't want Trump than wanted him. So they,
but it's not as anywhere near as simple this time around.
well, look at Biden's predicament right now. If he uses his leverage against Israel and their excesses in Gaza, then he will get the ire of AIPAC and the Israeli lobby. That's not good. They'll fight against him, and he needs their support to win. But on the other hand, if he doesn't get Michigan, he's done anyway, and that's where the Arabs are. So he's right in this sort of Goldilocks zone of death. Basically, he's like damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. He needs those Arab votes in Michigan. He needs to take Michigan. He only won it by about 150,000 votes last time. That's and
well, in fact,
there's the Arab vote right there.
Well, and here's the irony about all of that, of course, is that he needs to take Michigan. Michigan is the birthplace of the Republican Party, right? Jackson, Michigan is the home and the birthplace of the Republican Party. And the point being here is that Michigan has been primarily, much of the last 50 years, primarily a Democrat state.
Yeah, because it's got a lot of working people in it.
Yeah.
Car plants and,
At the same time, the one time it wasn't a Democrat state, it was a Republican state, was the year that that Trump got elected.
That's right. And that's because Hillary blew it. She never even visited Michigan. She thought she had it in her pocket.
Yeah.
That I don't really blame on her. I blame it on her campaign managers.
That's probably true. And, but again, I think that Hillary Clinton, whilst we must have at some point a female leader in America, and we will get one, Hillary Clinton was the wrong person at the wrong time.
Yeah. And she walked into a buzzsaw called Trump. They were absolutely unprepared. For
she was certainly unprepared for him. Yeah.
She was, and he was able to make fun of them. He was really immature and childish. Yeah. He made fun of what they looked like, and nobody was prepared to give it back to him, and that's what she should have been doing.
Yeah. Whereas, whereas Bernie Sanders at the same time actually was looking at the same much of the same demographic as Trump was, and that would have been a much different election.
Bernie Sanders was my man, and they should have had him run, but somehow Obama was able to talk him into dropping out of the race, and that was bad. If you had Senator Bernie Sanders in there, you would have got a lot more Democrats out to vote. What they did was they pissed off a lot of the black vote, the young black vote, who were really big behind Bernie, and they did not vote for Clinton. So that took that amount of vote right out, and that went right over to Trump, or at least it didn't work against Trump.
It didn't work against Trump. Yeah. And that 2016 election was an oddball, and basically, Trump versus Sanders was an entirely different dynamic than Trump versus Clinton.
Bernie was my man, Bolshevik Bernie. I think Bolshevik Bernie was my man.
I knew you were a communist at heart.
No, I mean, I say that with because when I listen to Bernie Sanders up here as a Canadian, I think of him as somebody slightly to the left, but down there he was a raging communist pinko commie as far as Fox was concerned. And
actually, I think Bernie Sanders wouldn't even be in the Liberal Party here. He'd be a conservative.
Seriously, yeah, he'd be a moderate conservative. But that's but basically they're like they spelled him out as a socialist disaster and said that the United States would turn into Venezuela if Bernie was elected. Yeah, that's going to happen. Yeah, somebody can do that with the snap of their finger. And remember, like Bernie Sanders he was pretty mild. I mean, I really dig his work most of the time, especially now against Gaza, where he demands the United States do not give Israel any more weapons because they are abusing it. They're actually going contrary to American conditions for weapons. But of course, Apex makes sure that nobody knows that or even tries it. It's alarming. But there is one guy. So Bolshevik Bernie is a Jewish guy, and he's got no truck with Netanyahu at all.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, absolutely. He's got nothing. Yeah,
I think he's just a damn good man. That's all.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, there's no way that APEC would actually be able to move against Sanders.
He's the only one that didn't prostrate himself to APEC. When Hillary was running, he refused to go to APEC. Trump was there, told him how wonderful he was, and he's got a Jewish son-in-law and a Jewish grandbaby. Hillary Clinton was just slobbering all kinds of gushing at APEC too. What does that tell you? And Bernie didn't walk in that door at all. He didn't want nothing to do with APEC.
Yeah.
So why look at these people gushing over APEC, right? And because they're afraid of him. Bernie wasn't afraid.
And basically Sanders actually was not really afraid of anybody and was actually perfectly prepared to, whether you like his politics or not, he was prepared to stand by his politics. And that's all there is to it, right?
Well, he's a man of moral fortitude, no matter which way you want to put it.
Yeah.
Much more than Biden. Biden is a liar. I mean, he goes on TV and says, I've seen the pictures of beheaded babies. Well, because there was no pictures, how could you see them?
Yes, I know. All right, moving on.
Not to mention his uncle got eaten by cannibals.
Yeah, let's come back home again. Okay, so chiefs of the Ontario and Ottawa-Piscat First Nations call for a legal review of the federal government carbon price basically they have concerns over how the levy is going and how discriminatory the application of that levy is.
Just I give a shot to Biden there about how what a liar he is, but I gotta say, don't you really admire Trump? He's selling Bibles and shoes all at the same time. What a guy!
He's selling something.
What do you want, the Bible or the shoes? I think I want one of these.
He's selling something, that's for sure.
I mean, who wouldn't want a shiny gold sneakers? Oh man, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah. Okay.
So I thought I'd better throw in a shot against Trump too.
Yeah. Okay. So last Thursday, First Nations in Ontario filed for a judicial review of the Greenhouse Gas and Pollution Pricing Act, more commonly referred to as the carbon tax, against Attorney General Arif Virani, Minister of Revenue Minister Marie-Claude Bibeau, Environment Minister Stephen Giblett, and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. Right. So in a press release, they basically said that carbon levy has a disproportionate impact upon First Nation communities who may not be able to equally benefit from the levy's rebate in the same way that other Canadians do.
Well, they don't pay income tax, a lot of them. That's why they can't get the kickback from the carbon tax. So that's why they don't get their payoff. So what do you want? Your cake and eat it too. But basically, here he's the chiefs of trying to. They're sort of saying we really do agree with climate change thing. First Nations see reality of climate change every day, they say, but they also figure they're not making out too well. They have to pay the big gas prices and big fuel prices, but not getting the rebate, or not as much of the rebate. So they want to carve out and Prime Minister Trudeau, when asked by reporters about the chief's decision at a press conference in Ajax, where he's making an announcement, this is the typical politician way of saying things. We're walking the road of reconciliation because we know how important it is to support Indigenous peoples as they build the strong, thriving communities and identify that they need. So, and identity that
what
they
a
need.
Load of bullshit,
Nothing at all about as we have worked with the Indigenous communities on affordability, on supports, and on fight against climate change from the very beginning, and we will continue to. In other words, an answer that wasn't an answer; it was a statement.
Yeah, that's what I've said. As I said, well done, Mr. Trudeau, for an absolute brilliant line of bullshit.
Wow, I've never seen anybody that doesn't answer. I thought Mulroney was bad. Sometimes Mulroney was able to manipulate a question. He used to sort of anger me, but nothing like Trudeau. I mean, when he's his back's to he doesn't come out fighting. He just comes out talking.
Yeah,
nonsense.
But he was probably educated how to put a line of bullshit together when he was a kid.
Oh well, yeah, he's been in a political family from the very beginning.
Yeah. Daddy's first lesson was how to speak a line of bullshit.
Yeah.
And carry it off well, and carry it off as if it really matters.
How to answer a question. It sounds like you're answering the question, but don't answer the question. Now, the carbon levy, which came into effect in Ontario in 2019, imposes a fuel charge on carbon-emitting fuels. Yeah, natural gas is sentiment, right? And 90% of this is supposed to come back. However, it says the other 10% is distributed to federal programs that support small business and Indigenous communities in Ontario. Indigenous communities get 0.7% of the rebate. However, the chief said that it is more difficult for First Nations to transition to less carbon-intensive alternatives because they face significant infrastructure and economic gaps along higher rates of poverty than the rest of the Canadian population. And that is very true.
I get that concern. I get that concern because that is a key concern that they have been expressing for years.
Yes, and really, when the incentivization, in other words, we're going to force you to consider other options, is not available to First Nations. But I would argue that it's not available for most people of humble means, no matter where they are in Canada, to say, well, you got to pay more carbon tax because we want to force you into buying more efficient automobiles and furnaces and all the rest. And that person of humble means says back to you, I can't afford a new car or a better car, and I can't afford another more efficient furnace because I don't have that kind of money. You can try to force me all you want, but I don't have the money to do it. Yeah. So the forcing the thing when you're trying to choke something down someone's throat. I mean, if you're in a position and you have a certain amount of money coming in and your options are coming up for a new furnace, let's say your furnace is 30 years old and you want a new one. Well, yeah, maybe you go for a more efficient one. But if your furnace is 30 years old and you're making $60,000 a year, and you got some old clunker of a car, and someone says, well, you're going to have to pay this carbon tax, because you're consuming too much how am I going to change? What kind of an incentive is that for me? You know, for the person, the average person, it's not an incentive. It's trying something to force you. That's why it won't work.
Yeah, and that is unfortunately one of the problems that we have around all of this, is that I think it's just not, it just doesn't work.
Says Indigenous people who live and make their income on the reserve are tax exempt under Section 87 of the Indian Act, and therefore many First Nations do not pay income tax. As a result, they are not able to claim the carbon levy rebate. Chiefs of Ontario said the 0.7% that is distributed to the First Nation communities is insufficient, given the increased cost of the charge on First Nation. So they're talking about carve-outs here, and a little later on it starts to talk about more and more carve-outs. The whole Trudeau has made that mistake of doing a carve-out for the eastern provinces, but then says he's going to do no more carve-outs. But now they are considering more carve-outs, and one of the carve-outs is a stall on the taxes, the carbon taxes on farmers. So the farmers have complained that it's hurting them really bad. So they've decided, okay, we're not going to do a carve-out here, but we're not going to increase the amount they pay like everyone else has to pay. And they're talking about a carve-out here for Indigenous people. If the whole thing was that carve-outs should not have been necessary at all, and yet that's what they're doing.
Well, isn't the other issue here is that, hey, with gas on First Nations, don't they get price cut? Don't they get it without tax?
I'm not so sure. I'm not
so sure.
Normal
sales tax, I'm meaning. If you buy on the res,
if it's on the reserve, it probably not.
Yeah,
but if the gas is sold other places, it does have the tax.
Yeah, and obviously, you're not in control all the time about where you buy your gas from.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, and I think heating oil and fuel for their snowmobiles and their boats and all other things that Indigenous people normally use to survive in their reserves and stuff. Yeah, so it's not working for the Ontario Indigenous groups, and it probably isn't working too well for the Indigenous groups throughout Canada. So I don't know. It gets a bit complicated. When they ask the tax, I'll be glad, because I just don't think that's going to work.
But again, one of the questions though is the last time, in the last couple of weeks, I noticed that what we had was a 9-cent increase in carbon tax, or at least that's what it amounted to on the gas price on the day, and then about 3 days later, we had a 15-cent increase on the price of gas that was brought about by the oil companies.
Yeah, the oil companies timed it pretty nicely there, eh? That everybody got used to the fact that they're going to have this big, carbon tax, so they just kind of piggybacked on that one.
Yeah, so but they mistimed it. Is if they had put it up at the same time as the carbon tax went up, everybody would have blamed the carbon tax. Instead, they put it up at a different time, so we ended up going from 150 something to 170 something in 3 or 4 days, when 9 cents was due to the carbon tax and 15 was due to the increase by gas companies.
It's not going to work very well for the Liberals, basically, because, and I'll return to this again, like the gas prices are going up anyway, and they want to make them even more.
Yeah,
it's going to hurt poor people, even though they get a rebate. But at the time is hurting them. They're supposed to be
and
prodding them into better choices, like I said before, better cars, better
but
furnaces,
I
better everything.
understand.
And
I
you can't
understand
do that if you're poor
Yeah.
or ordinary humble means. You just can't do that. So the whole idea of we're going to force you into behaving right just doesn't work.
Yeah. And the whole point is, I understand exactly where the chiefs come from in taking their action, because they're absolutely right, because they get stung because they don't get the rebates.
Yeah, and they still have to. Yeah, so the whole idea is
whatever you might feel about that, I'm just commenting in relation to the current situation.
Well, I'm saying that there's more and more demand for more and more carve-outs of the carbon tax. Now they've stalled the carbon tax for farmers because they're buying their argument that it's really hurting them and causing groceries to go up. They won't admit it straight out, but they'll just say they'll relieve farmers for the meantime. They did a carve-out for the eastern provinces, fuel oil, and claimed they'll never do another carve-out. But they're going to start doing more and more carve-outs because they're not going to be able to sell this tax in the next election.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and exactly that. They can't sell this tax in the next election. All right. Anyway, it's time for us to be calling it quits.
Yes, indeed.
Time for Dave to be resting his little COVID head.
Yeah, my big brain COVID head.
No, I will go back to his little COVID head. Anyway, and Dave?
Well, without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace, everyone. That Rafa, I can't, I can't stand it. They're going to go into Rafa. They're already killing dozens of people. They're digging up graves all over the place. And yet the world does the three monkey thing. See nothing, hear nothing. Well, they do. They hear a little, see a little, speak a little, but not much. So